Richard Sturzberg has had a long career in Canadian media, from executive director at Telefilm Canada to head of English programming at the CBC. That's given him quite a perch from which to take in the big picture of cultural production in this country. It also means a rare perspective from which to assess the challenge posed by companies such as Netflix and Amazon to Canada's content creation ecosystem. He offers some of his insight in a new book. It's called The Tangled Garden, a Canadian cultural manifesto for the digital age. And Richard Sturzberg joins us now. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
I can't believe this is your first time on this program.
It is.
Feels long overdue.
It is long overdue. I've been sitting by my phone waiting for your call for years now.
And it finally came.
Finally.
You know, after reading your book, I got the distinct impression that no one in either of the two main governing parties of this country, Conservatives and Liberals, wants to pursue the prescription that you have put forward in order to improve our cultural landscape. So let me start with this. Why'd you feel there was any point in writing this book in the first place?
Well, you know, I would say that now we are going through the worst cultural crisis in the post-war period.
That's quite a statement.
It is, and I think it's true. What's going on is that the major cultural institutions, by which I take that to mean the newspapers, magazines, and television, are in a state effectively of collapse. You know that in the newspaper business now, we've lost over 200 newspapers in the course of the last 10 years. The labor force has been chopped by 50%. All of the major television broadcasters, CTV, Global, City, they're all losing money. All the big papers are continuing to lose money. Postmedia is losing money, Torstar is losing money. It's only a question of how long, how much cash they actually have before they're going to find themselves in a situation of insolvency.
And nobody in a position of power seems to be seized of this
They're
issue.
not, well, they seem to be unseized by it. In fact, they seem to have put themselves in a situation which is bizarre, where they are in fact actively advantaging foreign media companies in Canada against Canadian media companies.
I'm going to pick up on that in a second. The metaphor you have used to describe it all, as the title of the book suggests, is the Tangled Garden. Just tell us what you meant by that.
So for years and years, there had been a consensus, essentially a nonpartisan consensus between both the Liberals and Conservatives about the importance of the creation and maintenance of Canadian culture. This is really, you know, because we are awash in the United States, and we historically have been, and that's all fine, but we have to find a space for ourselves if we're going to retain a kind of distinct identity in the northern part of North America. So for years and years and years, what the notion was that we would create a set of arrangements, of policies that would focus on ensuring that the means of distribution for culture, radio in the first instance, then television, newspapers, etc., were always in Canadian hands. You could flow American product into the country, obviously, but it should come through those Canadian hands.
And officially, that's still the policy. I mean, you can't be a foreigner and own CTV.
Well, that's correct, but the problem is you can be a foreigner and enter the broadcasting business.
Right.
So that's the difficulty we confront.
Amazon, Google, etc.
Amazon, Google, Netflix, soon we'll have Disney. Yeah. But at any event, the garden metaphor was a metaphor for the creation of this nonpartisan cultural policy designed to maintain the distinctiveness of our own country.
Is Canadian cultural nationalism, the kind of stuff you and I both grew up with, is that simply out of favor now today?
I don't know. You know, it's surprising to me. I don't know. Certainly in Quebec, it's not. In English Canada, over the course of the last two administrations, the Conservative administration seemed actively hostile to the development of Canadian culture.
And yet, they gave lots of money to the National Arts Centre for its rebuild.
Yeah, but
the Harper government.
Dare I say, that's a very small matter. Performing arts are not the core of who we are. The core of who we are, the really big popular media, are TV, newspapers, movies, and magazines. The rest is great, but it's not the core of popular culture.
All right, let's pick up on what you were about to embark on a few moments ago before I interrupted you, and that is the so-called FANGs, which is a new acronym that I just learned. I'm sure lots of people have heard of it before, but the FANGs are
Facebook, Amazon, Apple,
Google,
Netflix, Google.
Netflix and
Gotta
Google.
get them in the right order,
Sorry,
otherwise
right.
we'll get to the FANG.
That's right.
Otherwise you'll end up with faggins.
and that is an acronym that makes no sense. But FANGs make sense, of course, because in some respects, they're vampires on the culture. I guess that's part of the acronym one of the reasons you like that acronym. They're kind of vampires on the culture in some respects.
They are vampires on the culture in the sense that they set up in Canada. They do not pay taxes in Canada. despite the fact all the Canadian media companies obviously pay taxes. They have drained, between Facebook and Amazon, they have drained 50% of the media advertising market out of Canada and redirected the money now to Silicon Valley.
But clearly they are providing something people desperately want, which is why they're so successful.
No doubt about that. And that's fine, but they should not be allowed to operate enjoying significant advantages that no Canadian company has. All the Canadian companies pay tax, they respect the foreign ownership rules, they make contributions to Canadian culture. The FANGs do none of these things. So they're kind of free riders within the economy.
How has that been allowed to persist?
That's the most interesting thing. I think it's partly, in the case of the current government, they got snookered by the Harper government. You recall the Harper government had this no Netflix tax mantra, which was part and parcel of their consumer-friendly agenda. And then, unwisely, I think, the Liberals took up the same mantra. And now they're caught in it. If you can't tax Netflix, obviously you can't tax any of the others, let alone ask them to make a significant contribution to Canadian culture.
Why don't they just change their minds?
Well, they should change their minds. And besides that, the notion of a Netflix tax, nobody in their right mind has ever proposed that. What a Netflix tax would actually be would be to single out Netflix and say, we will go and tax you in a way that nobody else in the country is taxed. And nobody's ever suggested that. They've simply said, you should pay the same taxes as everybody else, and you should make the same contribution to Canadian content as everybody else. So there's no reason why they can't, just by clarifying that they're not going to tax Netflix. What they're going to do is simply say, you have to play by the same rules as Canadian companies.
How would you actually, if you're a government trying to bring in that policy, how would you actually effect that? Because obviously if you use Facebook, you're not paying anything. If you use Google, you're not necessarily paying anything. Advertisers are paying for the whole shot. So how would you implement government policy?
Well, there's two different levels to the problem. First of all, let's take HST. So if I'm going to advertise on Google, I don't have to pay HST to. But if I'm going to advertise on a regular newspaper, I do. That's unfair. That's one. Two, normally if I'm a Canadian company and I advertise on a Canadian newspaper or a Canadian television show, I can deduct that for tax purposes. I can say that's a legitimate business expense, I can deduct it. That was never supposed to apply to foreign-owned companies, American-owned companies like Google or Netflix.
And it does?
And it does. So if you were to just clear up the HST issues and these questions as to what qualifies in tax terms as a legitimate business expense, it would drop almost $1 billion to the bottom line of the government. So this is a major tax issue, as well as being a major fairness issue.
Okay, the question then becomes, would the government of the day that imposed that policy incur the wrath of voters/consumers, because no doubt these companies would raise their prices accordingly in order to make up for that revenue?
Well, as far as the second one is concerned, that's really an expense that applies to businesses and has no impact whatsoever on consumers. So that's a simple thing. If you apply the HST, I mean, so Google, or rather Netflix itself, for example, which is where individual consumers would be caught, Netflix itself has already raised its price in Canada by about $4. It would be nothing close to that. So the HST is going to be 8% for on the federal side, and then you tack on the provincial, it varies by province. It's going to be a very small amount of money.
I mean, literally, a couple of bucks a month, something like that?
Less.
Less than a couple of bucks a month?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet governments are terrified to impose that couple of bucks a month tax.
I don't understand it. Because the price that they pay in not imposing it is a level of unfairness to Canadian companies that no other government in the world is tolerating.
And it's interesting, Rogers and TELUS and Bell, despite all their heft, have been unable to convince the government to change its policy. How do you figure?
Well, as I say, I think they got trapped in their own rhetoric, and now they're afraid because they're afraid that they're going to be tarred with this as they go into the next election.
You do have a chapter in the book in which the Liberal government, when Mélanie Joly was the culture minister, the heritage minister, and she had a big splashing press conference to announce the fact that she had managed to convince Netflix to invest $500 million on producing content in Canada. And the government saw it as a great triumph. Right. Did you?
No. And I don't think anybody else saw it as a great triumph, if anybody knows anything about their business. Here's why. Yeah. So it was $100 million over 5 years, $100 million per each year for 5 years. The first problem was We didn't actually know what it was going to be spent on. There's no transparency in this. The contracts have never been made public. They had to spend $100 million in Canada. Was it on Canadian shows? We don't know.
What's a Canadian show anyway?
Well, a Canadian show is one, the way we define it now, is a show that actually is made by Canadians. So there's a whole point system that underpins it. So it's made, a Canadian show is a Canadian show. It's made with a Canadian director, a Canadian writer, Canadian actors, Canadian photographers, etc. But the other bigger problem is that if Netflix had to play by the same rules as CTV or Global, they would have to spend 30% of their gross revenues on Canadian shows.
And how much would that be?
That would be, in Netflix's case, not $100 million last year. It would be $230 million.
Way more.
So when you recalculate it and you say, how much should they have spent over the course of the 5 years? The answer is Melanie Joly probably left $1 billion on the table.
Well, did she leave it on the table, or was it, I mean, obviously the government would say it wasn't there to be had in the first place.
Of course it was there to be had. All that you have to do is, these are broadcasters. There's no doubt about that. They do the same thing as CTV. They commission shows, they make shows, they put the shows on, and then people watch TV. That's what they do. They're TV broadcasters. If the CRTC and the government would say, yes, absolutely, we should treat them the same as Canadian broadcasters, then that's what they would have to pay.
Can you just look in that crystal ball for a little bit and see what possible opportunity the Canadian contributors to content in this country have against the FANGs, given the imbalance you've described, and with the addition of Disney Plus coming on the scene fairly soon? How are they going to compete against all that?
So it's not clear that they are. I don't think anybody is proposing that we don't allow Netflix to continue to operate in Canada, or Disney, or Time Warner, AT&T, or any of these other great big global operations. It may be that traditional Canadian broadcasting, whether over the air like CTV or even the specialty channels, are going to find it very, very difficult to compete. So the only way in which we're going to be able to ensure that there is Canadian content is by saying to all of these big international players, you must spend 30% of your gross revenues in Canada making Canadian shows.
And what if they threaten to pack up and go home?
They're not going to pack up.
They're not going to do that. No chance?
No, they're not going to do it. And they're not going to do it, number one, because Canada is a very important market. Number two, because they've made essentially the same deal in Europe already. So the Europeans have said it's going to be 30% European content. And they said, okay. And it's good for their businesses because they understand that in many places it's a desirable thing to have local content. Now, if they do that, then the Canadian production industry will survive. Then we'll have Canadian shows, but they'll be sitting on different platforms, not traditional Canadian broadcasters. And if it works out properly, we'll also get Canadian shows exported internationally through these gigantic global platforms.
What would it require to get them to actually do that?
It requires basically, without getting too technical about it, for the government and the CRTC to agree that this is a desirable thing, not to force them to become Canadian-owned the way we did in 1969, but to say, we are perfectly happy for you to operate here, but you have to respect the same set of rules as the existing Canadian broadcasters. It's that simple. They don't need any changes in legislation to do it. They can do it. It's just a question of will.
The FANGs can't possibly like you at all, right? I mean, you're raising some uncomfortable issues that would affect their bottom line. Do you hear from them at all?
I wait by my phone. No.
Sounds like you do a lot of waiting by the phone.
I do. It's a lonely life. No, I think, I'm sure the FANGs are not surprised. A lot of the stuff that's, the proposals that are made in the book as to how to deal with these are proposals that are already being implemented in different jurisdictions. A lot of the stuff that's in here is simply cribbed from what it is that the Europeans and the UK have done. So there's a whole series of conversations that have been going on internationally. What's surprising to me is that this conversation doesn't seem to have moved forward in Canada. There's very little discussion of how we should actually deal with these questions.
We've got an election 6 months away. Is there any political party that you know of that's running on this kind of a platform?
I would be surprised if the Liberals did.
Well, they haven't yet.
They haven't yet.
Conservatives won't.
Well, it's a strange thing because when you think about the Conservatives, where their base now is, it's largely a sort of rural and suburban base. And the parts of the country that have been most hard hit by the destruction of the newspaper and local news industries are precisely those places. You go to Guelph. In Guelph, the Guelph Mercury was around before Confederation. It was around for 175 years. It's gone. And nobody's done anything about it, right? The history of Guelph was the archive of the Mercury. It was the Mercury that, made sure the city council behaved itself, made sure the parks were safe for children, all the stuff that local newspapers do. Gone. And that's true not just of Guelph, it's true of all of the sort of small towns and suburban areas that have been the real base of the Conservative Party. So, whether they're going to take it up or not, I don't know.
NDP?
Well, you would think the NDP, this would be a natural for the NDP. This is a,
Haven't heard them say anything about it yet.
No, I have not either. But if there was ever a party that was, a cultural nationalist party, it was the NDP. But the thing that's really puzzling to me, Steve, about all this is, historically, there was as I was saying, a bipartisan consensus. There are two great files in Canadian history, only two. One is the relationship between the French and the English, and the other is the relationship to the United States. And historically, we've always said that if we want to preserve a distinct culture in Canada, we have to have a bipartisan consensus on how we're going to deal with the United States, particularly when it comes to these kinds of issues.
Brian Mulroney insisted on the cultural exemption and the free trade talks.
Absolutely.
But that kind of approach seems to
Well, that's what's puzzling about it.
gone.
That's what's puzzling about it.
Yeah. I want to ask you about another aspect of our Canadian culture here. I guess I should say English Canadian culture, because as you pointed out earlier, there's a pretty vibrant box office in Quebec for French language films. But English Canadian box office for English Canadian movies is really not very good. Why is that?
I think it's a number of things that are going on all at the same time. One, it's always been a how can I put it? It was essentially an art house business for years and years and years. The second thing is that there were efforts to be able to ensure that Canadian distributors were strengthened so that they could finance Canadian movies more effectively, but those efforts failed, and they failed in the 80s, and they were part and parcel of there was a failure at the time. The failure actually really revolved around, interestingly, the free trade negotiations. And you may recall, Ronald Reagan was then the president. There was a big move to be able to ensure that the majors' distribution arrangements in Canada were changed to help out Canadian movies. And Ronald Reagan, he was a movie guy. Apparently he phoned Brian Mulroney and he said at a certain point, well, I tell you what, you can have one of two things. You can have your film bill that Flora MacDonald had been pursuing, or you can have the trade deal. Which would you like? And of course, he didn't have much of a choice. So structurally, we never fixed the movie business the way we fixed the TV business, or the radio business, or the newspaper business. And in part because of these structural difficulties, it's never flourished in the same way.
I always hear from English Canadian filmmakers that A, they can't get screen time in movie theaters, and B, if they manage to, the films are there for a week and then gone. I'm not sure how you actually get in front of, how do you get eyeballs on your product if you don't have any screens to put it on?
Well, I think I think that's a little unfair. They do get, screen time if they have a movie that the movie houses think is going to be attractive. If Cineplex Odeon thinks this is a movie that they can actually sell tickets to, they'll keep it. And they'll keep it for as long as they can sell tickets. But then you have to say to yourself, okay, we're actually going to have a plan where we're going to say what matters is selling tickets. That was the plan of the Liberal government, whatever it was, in the year 2000 when I took over Telefilm. They said, we want 5% of the box office. And they said, are you comfortable with that? I said, I am. And we did. We took 5.3% of the box office in 2005, the last round of films that had been financed when I was there, through 2003, 2004.
Just think about that for a second, though. 5.3% of the box office.
It's a kind of de minimis number. Now, we actually got to it. Nobody's gotten close since. So the box office for Canadian movies would be maybe, all rolled up, including the French market, 1.5%, 2%.
I know you make the argument in the book. Can you imagine in the United States if American product made up 5% of box office sales?
Exactly.
There'd be a revolution.
Absolutely.
But here, nothing seems to happen. Let's do a quote from the book here. You say in the book, if the federal government does not wake from its torpor, the major Canadian media companies are likely to collapse and bring down the film and television production industries with them. If this happens, English Canada will be effectively, culturally annexed by the United States. Now, I don't have to tell you, a lot of people have been forecasting cultural annexation for decade after decade after decade. Why do you think this is a magic moment?
Because Historically, the newspaper and television businesses in Canada were quite vibrant businesses. They did very well financially. And now, for the first time in Canadian history, both of those businesses are underwater. As I say, there's a series of things that are proposed to help them make a transition, to help shore them up, in the same way as we do like cooking shows on TV. But if we don't do anything, then you look at their financials, then there's little doubt that they have not a lot of time to last. I mean, it's difficult to see exactly how much cash they have on their balance sheets, but that's basically it. Every quarter, they lose money. So how long they can last depends on how much cash they have on their balance sheets, and when that runs out, it's over.
Let me, for argument's sake, make the other side of the argument and get you to tackle that one, which is to say, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and if these folks can't carry their own water without tons of government subsidies, if they can't compete against American product, tough, let them sink.
Yep. Well, that's not the view we've taken when it came to television. That's not the view we've taken when it came to movies. It's not the view we've taken when it came to radio. It's not the view we've taken with respect to any of the sort of major cultural institutions in the country, historically. I mean, for the last, almost 100 years. So some people take that view. I don't happen to take that view. I do take the view, however, that news is fundamental to the democracy. It's fundamental to the country itself. I don't understand why we say, we'll put money into cooking shows, public money into cooking shows, and we won't put public money into news.
As in newspapers?
As in newspapers, as in television news. News generally. Because it terrifies me when I think about what kind of country we're going to have if we have no Canadian news. It just seems to me incomprehensible. Now, this is not a particularly radical notion. I mean, lots of countries around the world subsidize news. France puts in just over €1 billion a year. And when you go to Paris, you go to the newsstand, there are how many papers in Paris? 15? They range from, Combat and Libération on the left to the Figaro and even crazier people on the right. So I don't see, and the French do it for a very simple reason. They believe that this kind of discourse is fundamental to the society and fundamental to the democracy. I personally am of the view that we should provide fair subsidies to news, but subsidies, not the ones that have been structured by the government in the last economic statement in the budget, but subsidies that are designed in such a way the government has no ability whatsoever to make any editorial judgments.
The fear, of course, by doing that is that you had a meeting with Paul Godfrey, didn't you?
Sure.
Who runs the National Post Media?
Yeah.
Yeah, the fear is that money, that $650 million that is at the moment under consideration, is going to end up in the pockets of newspaper executives rather than on hiring more reporters to do good journalism.
Right. So what we propose in this book is we propose that they should be provided with tax credits. The tax credits should apply only to the people who are actually producing the news. So the tax credits are labor-based. What it means is that you get a certain percentage of the costs of labor bought down by the government. But the labor that's involved is only journalists, editors, photographers, videographers, layout artists, those people, not the executives and not the sales force. And that's exactly how we do it for TV and movies.
Did you lay that out for Paul Godfrey?
Yes.
What did he say to that?
Paul Godfrey is totally fine with that. And the newspaper industry is generally totally fine with that. The newspaper industry would like to have a set of arrangements which were automatic in character, not a bunch of committees being set up by governments who are selecting, oh, this is worthy news, that's not worthy news, you're a worthy news outlet, you're not a worthy news outlet. But to have it run exactly the same way as we do with television and movies and say it's automatic. And the people who will make the judgments about what gets covered are the editors, whether they're the TV editors or whether they're the newspaper editors, not government officials.
There's so much more to talk about, and I'm out of time already, but I'm going to go, let me go over can I do one more question here? As I mentioned, the election is coming up. If you wanted to make a recommendation to any of the political parties that are seeking votes, give them one idea that they ought to go to the polls on.
I think they ought to go to the polls on the general idea that it's important to have a vibrant Canadian media landscape, and it's fundamental to our democracy and our sense of ourselves as a people.
Do any of them care enough about the future of newspapers or journalism to want to incorporate that in their platforms?
I don't know. We'll see.
That is the
see.
answer to so much in life, isn't it?
We'll
We shall
see.
see. The name of the book is The Tangled Garden, A Canadian Cultural Manifesto. It is that for the digital age. Richard Stursberg has been our guest. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.